Woohoo!
Hello there. Thank you all for coming out. Is this not the best CPAC ever? All right. Well, let's get started after our last panel. I think Emma and Dick set it up quite nicely for us. I'm actually going to go to Graham Hill. First, before we ask him some questions, let me tell you who he is. Graham was born and raised hunting and shooting in Texas. I said Texas, where he remains very active hunter and shooter with his 3 boys and his wife. He's an active shooting sports competitor in 3-gun, IDPA, and sporting clays.
Awesome.
He's a managing partner of the law firm Ice Miller's DC office and CEO of Ice Miller Strategies. He's held several positions in Congress, and he served in the Bush administration as well. Please welcome Graham Hill.
Thank you.
Actually, I'm going to introduce everybody. Carrie Lightfoot, lovely Carrie, is the founder and owner of the Well-Armed Woman, the largest and most trusted woman shooter resource and product company. Carrie is also the founder and chairwoman of the board of the Well-Armed Woman Shooting Chapters, the nation's largest nonprofit women shooting organization with 380 chapters in 49 states, folks.
Woohoo! That's a lot of estrogen.
Carrie is a consultant to the firearms industry, an author, a very, very popular national speaker, and frequent guest in national media. Please give a warm welcome to Carrie Lightfoot. My partner in crime right here to my left is Willis Lee, retired Army Lieutenant Colonel. Willis is the president of the National Federation of Republican Assemblies. Willis is the co-chairman of the Trump-Pence Second Amendment Coalition, former Republican Party state chairman and current RNC member, a founder of the RNC Conservative Caucus. Lee is a retired Army Airborne Ranger, Armor Combat Veteran, U.S. Military Academy at West Point graduate with degrees, I read that too fast, didn't I? Engineering and public administration. Willis, and I think this is what he, with his, by the way, I had to cut his bio. It's a lot more than this. But of all his accomplishments, I think Willis is most proud of his wife and his church, Our Savior Youth Lutheran Church in Virginia. Welcome, Willis Lee. Thank you. All right, Grant, let's get started with you. I think Emma and Dick did a wonderful job, but I was particularly interested that they said that the Heller decision, or Dick said that what they won, or Emma said, that what they won was the right to keep. But as we all know, the Second Amendment says keep and bear arms. So, important distinction. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Thank you very much, and thank you for having us here and having this panel. That is a very important distinction. The Heller decision had 2 landmark characters to it. First, it established once and for all that there is an individual right protected in the Constitution. That had been unsettled previously. But the facts of the case that Dick and Emily discussed were can you own your own gun in your home for self-defense? And the court said yes. That leaves open a huge range of practical activities that we all associate with the Second Amendment. They make enjoying the Second Amendment, exercising that freedom, practical. Those were left undecided by Heller. And in the time since then, what we've seen is state legislatures have decided to fill out that larger meaning of Heller. In conservative states like Texas, where I'm from, those practical associated activities are very robust, and you enjoy great Second Amendment freedoms. But if you're in California, or Illinois, or Maryland, or New York, those state legislatures are defining those associated activities very narrowly. In fact, just this week, on Tuesday, the Supreme Court denied review of a case out of California that the Ninth Circuit held that restricts your Second Amendment rights. Yesterday, the Second Circuit, just yesterday, upheld a New York City law that says if I have a permit in New York City to what's called a premises permit, I can't take my pistol to Westchester County to arrange and bring it back into the city. The Second Circuit said that doesn't violate your Second Amendment rights. They're defining that in a way that's incredibly narrow, and I would argue that's impractical. So that's the battle, if I can say it that way, that's been occurring since the Heller decision. So we all have two things we can do. We have to fight in the legislatures, make sure we get people elected there that appreciate the size and scope of the Second Amendment, what it should really mean. That will allow people like Carrie to do the wonderful work that she does in empowering women. Willis does a tremendous amount of work in those legislatures trying to make sure they appreciate this. And we have to make sure that we get judges appointed at the federal level that respect the
Donald Trump
Second
is doing a pretty good job at
and
that, is he not?
And that's happening.
Yes.
You know, really quick follow-up. So you're saying the bottom line is that as important and critical as the Heller decision was, it's essentially one slice of the apple here, that we still have to carry the ball further to make sure that the second part of the Second Amendment is ratified.
Imagine that was the First Amendment and all the protected speech you enjoyed was as long as you were in your home.
Right.
Think of all the other meanings of that right, what that freedom really means, that wouldn't be covered by it. So that's a way to think about what's ahead of us. And it's been said a lot, freedom is always one generation away from being gone.
Absolutely.
And all of you out there, this next generation, you have to fight that fight. We're here because of people that went before us, people like Willis that fought to preserve these liberties, like Carrie trying to help people defend themselves. The next generation is going to have to continue that fight as well.
Very good, very good.
It's all coming around through the states.
It
Kind of
is.
sneaking its way through the states. So we all have to be so active and supporting
Vigilant.
the local Second Amendment organizations on the ground at home, because we get distracted by all the federal stuff up here. But the dangerous stuff's happen at the state level.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Carrie, that's actually a nice segue to where I want to go with you. You've got a powerful organization, and you know, I think about all your chapters and all these women learning how to keep and bear arms and be proficient and be professional with it, you know. And I think of the contrast when I think of you and I think of your organization and all these women out there learning how to shoot and shoot accurately. I think of that in the contrast, if you will, of certain aspects of the Me Too movement and the victimology that's promoted. You know, the French actress Catherine Deneuve criticized the Me Too movement and said that, you know, it's really promoting victimology. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your organization and the contrast, if you will, empowerment versus being a victim for women.
I mean, that's who we are. We are about breaking the chains of victimhood for women and through the empowerment of their own self-protection. Because you know what, and there's women out here, women are so tired of being sexually harassed. I mean, they're tired of being assaulted. They're tired of being raped. We're tired of being murdered. You know, women, we're the prey. Women are the prey of violent crime. And so women across this country are saying, you know what? It's not me. I will not be a victim again or ever. And yes, never. And so I get to see women kind of making that transition into their own self-protector, because women have historically been the protected gender, right? It's either the men in our worlds or law enforcement. We already know of the failures in counting on our government and local services to protect us. They can't do it. We have to be our own first responders. So through educating and equipping and empowering women into that role, they are taking their lives back. You know, we have women 18 to 92 in our organization. Do you know how awesome it is to see a 90-year-old woman take her life back? To be able to feel like she can go to the store if she needs to? You know, because as you know, I said earlier that women are the prey of violent crime, and we kind of are born with that target on our back. You know, there's that disparity of force. Typically, we're smaller and weaker. And so as we age, that target gets bigger and bigger and bigger. You know, so to be able to assist women into taking that life back, right, and shrinking that target, it's a remarkable thing to see. And I see women liberated from that bondage of fear every day, and it's an absolutely beautiful thing.
God bless you for what you're doing and with your chapters
Oh, I'm
all
the
across the
blessed one.
country.
Thank you.
You're not only helping women to defend themselves, I get the feeling that men might behave a little bit better knowing how well armed women are.
You know, it changes them. Women are really changed by it, just that confidence. You know, and I teach the women in our organization, you know, it's about their confidence.
Right.
And when a woman's confidence grows and they go, you know what, I got this. I'm good. I can take care of myself no matter what comes my way. It changes everything. It changes how they relate to people, changes how they relate to bosses and work and how they walk through a parking lot. So it's really a beautiful thing. It's a really significant thing. And women, right, we're tired of it. No more abuse, no more violence. Take it back.
Well, of course, the elephant in the room is the horrific tragedy that occurred in Florida, and of course, before that, in my hometown of Las Vegas. And any human life, innocent human life that is lost is a terrible, terrible tragedy. But reality is, those precious lives that were lost in Florida and Vegas and Newtown and these other massacres are critically important, but it's also critically important that precious, innocent lives are lost every day in big cities like Chicago, Baltimore, Philadelphia, in all these areas where they have the strictest, most repressive, gun prohibitionist, gun control laws in the nation. People are more vulnerable. Decent people, law-abiding people, are vulnerable to crime. Criminals don't pay attention to gun laws. Decent people do. And Willis, you spend an awful lot of time with legislatures all across the country, in the red states and with the blue states. Can you tell us, practically speaking, how the Heller decision has manifested itself, particularly in blue cities and states?
Thanks, Niger. I spend a lot of time, working specifically in blue states. That may explain some of the gray hair. We've lost a lot more fights than we've won, but generally the blue states tried to just ignore the Heller decision and the follow-on McDonald decision. And that's been their track so far, forcing us, law-abiding citizens, to try to move the process through the courts. You know, the blue states are getting more blue. They're each trying to outdo each other to see who can put the most onerous anti-gun, anti-civil rights laws into effect, and hoping they can push that through. Now, fortunately, and in some of these states, I have to work with Democrats, not Republicans, because the Democrats are all we have to work with to stop a lot of these very ugly bills. But the bottom line is, as America, as we become more separated between red and blue, states, cities, municipalities, we're going to see more of this until we speak our voice. 120 million gun owners, 120 million voices that have a vote have to make our desires known to support our Second Amendment.
Now's not the time for complacency.
Well, I got a question the other day, and you'll all get this, because I do work with the NRA. Somebody said, why does the NRA keep sending me all those fundraising emails? They're acting like it's always a crisis. Yeah, exactly. That was my response. In my lifetime, it always has been a crisis. They've tried to absolutely ban handguns 3 times just since I've been around. They're still on this track right now of trying to ban semi-automatic rifles. Tell me a time when there's not a crisis. That's just one example, but yes, they're always going to come, because it's not about guns. This is about control.
Yeah, actually, I want to dovetail on that. I was going to say something really controversial, which is that the Second Amendment has nothing to do with guns, which sounds counterintuitive, right? But it does not. I mean, guns, of course, are a part of it, but be it a gun, be it a knife, be it a billy club, be it martial arts, what the Second Amendment is about is the fundamental God-given right of self-defense.
Amen.
Protecting yourself, protecting your family, protecting your community. That's what this is about. And that's what these liberals, or progressives, or whatever they call themselves, they're really, quite frankly, social democrats, maybe even communists, but but that's what they're trying to go after. So how dare they righteously point their fingers at us? We are on the right side, ladies and gentlemen. As you go back to your schools, your campuses, your communities, you go back with a stern backside, knowing that you are on the right side of our Constitution, you're on the right side of history, and the right side of God. Willis, with this terrible situation in Florida, of course, the president was here yesterday, gave a kick-butt speech, and he said that, unlike the politicians that are just going to point fingers of blame and say, we got to put the NRA out of business and all that kind of nonsense, that he's going to actually do something. And one of the things that many of us within the movement have been talking about is the number of retired policemen, the number of ex-veterans that would love the opportunity to protect children in our schools. What do you think about that idea?
Well, first of all, let me start with describing the president's speech as kick butt. Yeah, was that a good description? Yeah. All right.
It was a PG version.
Yeah. All right, I'm on that. Look, I don't know if we've done this because I'm in and out of rooms already. Folks that are associated or you've been with law enforcement or your first responder or your military or former military, show of hands, just right now, those of us in the room. Because I'm going to be thank you. I'm talking to everybody and including whatever viewing audience we have, but I'll be talking about you. And that's why I just thought we ought to point you out. I am the president of the National Republican Assemblies, and so I do believe we should protect our children, all of our babies. And beginning at the start of this, I'll go back to a fundamental breakdown of the family. After 8 years of Obama, we've lost confidence in the government, and we allowed Christ to be kicked out of our schools. Simply being allowed to carry a firearm is a deterrent. The bad guys have a mission. They don't want to fail in whatever their mission is. They're going to go wherever it's easiest. So the goal would be to protect your facility more than the other guy. That's the whole U.S. anti-terrorism and anti-crime philosophy. Harden your facility, the guy's going to go somewhere else because you can't stop everything. So going forward, what do we want to do? We at least want to have this discussion now whether our schools need to be more secure. Now, I'm conservative, many of you are. I think this discussion has to engage the big picture. This week, a week after the Parkland shooting, of which all of us are still emotional, we're still heartbroken, this week, Planned Parenthood murdered more babies.
Wow.
All right?
Yep.
Racist policies ban firearms from law-abiding citizens in Chicago, in Baltimore, in Detroit, and the carnage on our streets continues. So all of that has to be part of this discussion they want. But in the big picture, do I believe that we can have soldiers, law enforcement operators who are trained and experienced help to secure our schools? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you. Graham, I'm going to get you back in here. This is a follow-up to my first question. What are the consequences of the Supreme Court not taking up the case of fulfilling that second part of the Second Amendment and reining in these federal courts so that, that are often upholding the state legislature's laws that are really gun prohibitionist in nature?
That's a good point, because the purpose of the Supreme Court is to police the legislatures on the Bill of Rights. Ordinarily, on a First Amendment issue, for example, if a state passed a law that violated it, the Supreme Court would intervene and say, you can't do that. But since the McDonald ruling, which was the one that made Heller applicable to the states, The Supreme Court has had almost 3 dozen Fourth Amendment cases and about 2 dozen First Amendment cases, but 0 Second Amendment cases, leaving that field open for the states. What we need is the Supreme Court to establish, build out that jurisprudence around the Second Amendment, those practical activities. Can I go to a gun range? Can I take my boy hunting in Texas with an AR to shoot hogs? What things can I do and what things can I not do? And until that happens, we're going to have balkanized rules. It's going to be one way in California, one way in Texas. We don't have that for due process. You have the same rights if you're arrested in Texas as you do in California. Well, the First Amendment's the same thing. So the consequences are bad. The second series of consequences, in my opinion, are more long-term. If we as a country can decide that some rights are unfavorable at a particular point in time and limit them, there's not a restraint on that same thing happening 50, 100 years from now, 10 years from now, on another right. We've seen that in our history already when it comes to race, when it comes to gender, and how rights are used. These rights are there to protect, for example, in the First Amendment, it's not there to protect popular speech, it's there to protect unpopular speech. When things become unpopular and there's a big group saying, no, we don't want that anymore, that's exactly when the right is there to stop it. That can happen to the Second Amendment, it can happen to others. So people and the courts disregarding the significance of that individual right has implications for the longevity of freedom in this country. I don't think it's limited now. You learn that lesson, and later it's applied to other things. And what I'm interested in is, what does this country look like 100 years from now? I care right now, too, for my kids and their grandkids. But 150 years ago, somebody cared about what this country looks like now. And we need to care about what it looks like down the road.
Yes.
And that means protecting these rights.
Yes.
Absolutely. Willis, you had a question?
Graham, let me add, was it unusual for recently Justice Thomas to come out publicly to chastise his peers for not accepting more cases that involve the Second Amendment?
Justice Thomas and the Jackson dissent and the Sylvester dissent that was just released Tuesday and I encourage anybody to read it, as Emily said earlier about the Heller decision, it's eminently readable, has a long discussion of the question of disfavored rights. And he's pointed out, if a state had a 10-day wait period on an abortion, he thinks that case would get cert like that. But if it's a 10-day wait on a handgun,
which is what they just dealt with on the case
in the
from
Sylvester
California.
case, you can't get a cert review on it. He has a very articulate narrative in there about pointing out that we're not treating this right the way we do every other right, and that's a problem for us.
It is a problem.
You know, we're wrapping up this panel, and Carrie, this question is coming to you. Obviously, we're talking about the future of the Second Amendment, but really, you know, I think I know my father, may he rest in heaven, Roy Innes, the great Roy Innes, said to me, thank you.
We got some people who remember. Thanks.
Said to me many, many years ago that, you know, the Bill of Rights are an insurance policy for us. And quite frankly, all of the Bill of Rights, all 9 of the Bill of Rights rest on the Second Amendment. Because if the Second Amendment goes away, the other ones will go away eventually as well, be a domino effect. So, Carrie, when we talk about the future of the Second Amendment, we're really talking about the future of the country. And I'm going to ask you, I'm going to be gender partisan here and say, does the future of the Second Amendment and our country really rest on women? And are they the critical demographic? If we win women, empower women, let them know that this is about protection and not about aggressive violence. This is about protection, protecting the family, protecting themselves from being victims, and empower them. Can we win this thing?
Boy, I tell you what, when we get women together on a cause, ladies out there, what happens when you're put on a task? You get it done. And you get it done with passion, right? Seriously, I think when we can unleash the voice of the female gun owner and their passionate stories, it's a game changer. And you know what? The media knows that. They're afraid of that. We just did an interview with 60 Minutes, and I brought 6 women with me for a full day of interviewing. Full day. Not a second of it was aired. These women, this was on National Reciprocity. This was the CBS a week or 2 ago. They were afraid of it. We were so articulate and responsible and passionate.
And normal.
And normal.
I just like normal.
Yes.
Yeah.
They couldn't show it because it was the wrong message, not what they wanted to show. So I do think it's important. And I think we have to counter the efforts by groups like Moms Demand or Everytown, whatever they're called now, whatever Bloomberg's calling it now,
group, yeah.
whatever. Their messaging is that women with guns is dangerous. You're going to get hurt with it. You're not strong enough. You can't handle that.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, that's because they're afraid of us too.
Yeah.
They know the power of the woman's voice and our activism. And so they're shackling us to that bondage of fear and to victimhood. What kind of women's rights is that? What kind of equalism? That's not equality. I mean, we can be equal about deciding, we can be equal in the corporate world. We can be the President of the United States. And we can have choice over our bodies and what happens to it. Well, I want the choice over what happens to my body so I can defend it.
That's right.
So anyway, ladies, get out, call to action. Take someone shooting. Doesn't have to be a woman. Take someone shooting.
Curious.
That's my call to action to you guys, all right? Yes, you're going to go shooting?
Awesome. How many ladies are going to go shooting? Raise your hands.
Woo!
I think they all did. Outstanding.
Take a friend.
Very good. Well, actually, I can't think of a better way to end this wonderful panel. Please, ladies and gentlemen, give this wonderful panel, Willis, Carrie, Graham, a round of applause. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Remember, you are on the right side and you're at the right place. Greatest CPAC ever.
That's it.
Thank you all. God bless you.
Thank you, folks.